And then unless y'all prefer to wait for start time, we're good when everyone else is.
Have you seen the email chain yet, by the way?
Yeah, I did send it. Did you not get it?
I haven't received it. Let me check spam. It goes in there sometimes. No, not yet. I'll let you know when that goes through though, and then we should be good to start early if y'all want to.
Okay. Your email is nln2050
Oh no, it's at
or
E.
at ENISD.
Yeah, yeah. That should be the right email. I think.
Oh
I'll
wait,
check as
sorry.
well.
Did you say NLN2050? I think it's N.
It's NL9.
Yeah.
Here, I'll send in the chat the two emails I sent the chain to.
That looks right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I did get it.
Nathan, your voice is a little low. Can you move near the microphone, please?
Oh wait, can you not hear me? Is it like not loud?
It's okay, but it's a little faint. How is it for the others? Or is it just me?
A bit faint, but all right.
Yeah.
I can.
I can hear Catherine very clearly.
I can try to speak like louder. I don't know if this sounds better. I'll be speaking like this voice probably when I'm speaking in the speeches. Is this okay? Okay.
Okay, wait. So Nathan, did you get it yet, or are you still waiting on it?
I'm still waiting. I don't know what's going on with my email.
Okay. I guess is Walt Whitman cool with just like sending it out again and seeing if it works the second time then?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
What I'll do is just forward the original chain to Nathan again.
I'll be right back.
It still isn't coming through. I think my email might just be like really slow right now. Do y'all use like a Google Doc? If so, could you just like add me onto the case so I can see it, or like make a new Google Doc with the case on it? Or when you send the case doc.
Sure. Yeah, that works.
Or honestly, if we wanted to just do evidence, we could do evidence exchange on a doc if the email doesn't come in like 5 minutes.
I mean, I don't really have a preference. Like I like chains better than docs.
Could you have your partner try to send it to you?
Yeah, bring forward it to Nathan. And also, I guess we can always just like, send the doc in the email and then also add Nathan to the doc, and then we'll just like have both. Okay, I'm gonna forward it to him. And actually, just as a last resort, Walt Whitman, would y'all put your emails in the chat, and I'll see if it works when I like create the chain too, and then, why not? Oh, also, just to preface, are y'all cool with sending like the case docs and stuff like before you read constructive?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll do that too. All right.
Okay, so I got Alex's forward like right away. Let me.
Maybe it's because we're not in your ISD,
I guess that's
so we're like external and it's going probably to your outbox or something.
the problem is that
I
the forward.
Or sorry, go ahead, Nathan. Yeah.
Yeah, Alex, could you just make the chain yourself then? Because if you forward
Yeah,
it, you can't.
I just sent my own version of the chain out using Walt's emails. Yeah.
Okay, we should be able to use that then, because that should probably go through.
And then also, Nathan, as soon as you get the one that I just sent out, can you forward it back to me also?
Okay.
Thanks.
Now, in an amazing turn of events, I am not getting the chain, so I'll let you know when it comes through. If this if this doesn't come through, we might just want to use a Google Doc, I guess. But that gets messy with sending case.
Wait though, to be clear, like Nathan, you got the forward, right? When I forwarded it to you?
Yeah, I got the forward. I
So
still
if
haven't
we
got
all
the
just can we all reply to that forward and then like use it that way and then it'll work?
Well, I don't think they got it.
Oh, well, they're not gonna get the forwards. Oh, okay, yeah.
Let's just make a Google Doc.
Yeah, that's probably the best idea. So also what's probably causing the email chain problem is that our school doesn't allow us to like send docs to people and stuff and like share them with outside of our district. So can you all put like an open doc in the chat and we can all use that?
What?
Can
Sorry.
you like send the open doc in the chat?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll just like paste in everything we're reading in each speech into that open doc each time we.
Okay. So now are we good?
Let me open it. Okay. I'm good on the doc. Are the judges fine?
Yeah, I'm good on the doc. I can see it now.
Y'all understand like case docs before? We can make like specific sections. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we'll send it when we're just about to begin speaking.
Okay. I think we're nearing the start time, so Westlake is good to begin whenever.
Sounds good. Just give us 1 second to get the doc in. All right, everything's in.
I think Westlake should be good to go.
Yeah, where you go when y'all are.
Sounds good. Yeah.
In that case, is everyone ready? Good to hear. We negate. Our first contention is military spending. Macron 18 writes that growth in Japan's real GDP per head has outperformed every major economy with 2 decades of rising living standards. Yamaguchi 19 explains that Article 9 enabled Japan to predominantly focus on economic growth. However, by crowding out productive capital investment, Hiller 18 quantifies that a 1% increase in military spending decreases economic growth by 9%. Thus, Gunner 14 concludes that Japan's remilitarization may only distract it further from devising sustainable socioeconomic reforms necessary for what it needs to do to expand. Critically, Japanese growth avoids global depression and conflict. Also, No 9 concludes that if Japan's economy collapses, supply chains across the globe will be affected. Asian nations may turn to authoritarian powers to limit the damage. Yang 19 of World Bank terminalizes that in East Asia over the last few decades, 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. Our second contention is protests for peace. Ho 17 writes that angry protests on the streets of Beijing and Seoul are highly possible if revision occurs, as most Chinese consider Japan's constitutional revision a march back to its military past. Empirics prove after Japan bought the Senkaku Islands in 2012, Jacob 12 furthers that police across China battled to control widespread anti-Japan demonstrations, allowing social unrest that could destabilize the political transition in China. Large protests may be used to attack government corruption. Zhao 15 continues that as social problems cause deep discontent across society and lead many to protests, the cracking up moment could come when Beijing is unable to sustain the regime's legitimacy. Instability goes nuclear. Story 13 concludes that the political disintegration or a fragmented China could result in nuclear weapons falling into the hands of irresponsible local leaders and pose a threat to the world. Our third contention is Kuril conflict. Williams 22 finds that the Kuril Islands have been a point of controversy between Japan and Russia for decades. Moscow took control of the islands after World War II. In recent years, the Japanese government had refrained from referring to the islands as its territories in order to avoid upsetting the Russian government. However, the tide is changing. Williams continues that following the invasion of Ukraine, the Japanese government has reinstated its historic claim on the islands. Indeed, Japan Times 22 writes that Japan describes Russia's hold over the disputed islands as an illegal occupation. The classification will appear for the first time since 2003, reflecting Tokyo's shift away from a conciliatory stance toward Moscow to a more hostile position. If a conflict were to begin over the Kurils, Russia has everything to lose. Makovic 20 finds that even indications that the Kremlin was willing to discuss the status of conquered islands were seen by Russian nationalists as treason, particularly the Kuril Islands. Recent constitutional changes in Russia suggest this view has only hardened. The new Russian constitution includes a ban on any alienation of Russian territories. This precludes the return of even 1 square meter of Russian territory to Japan. Indeed, Makovic concludes that a potential return of the Kuril Islands to Japan would be interpreted as a clear sign of Russian weakness, which would result in a serious political crisis leading to the breakup of the Russian Federation. Nonetheless, Russia has thus far responded to Japan's rhetoric proportionately because of Japan's historic commitment to pacifism enshrined in Article 9. Williams 22 explains that the Russian government told Japan it is ending negotiations to sign a formal peace treaty because of Tokyo's efforts to claim the Kuril Islands belong to them. Additionally, Reuters 22 writes that Russia is conducting military drills on the Kurils with more than 3,000 troops and hundreds of pieces of army equipment. However, without Article 9, Russia understandably has no reason not to believe that an invasion is imminent. In that instance, Russia must respond with decisive preemptive force or else risk losing the Kurils and its collapse. Stanton 22 finds that in a conflict, Japanese strike aircraft may suppress Russia's air defense and coastal missile systems deployed on the disputed islands. For this reason, Stanton concludes that the warships and submarines of the Russian Pacific Fleet will not be able to show proper resistance to the forces of Japan, and it is only a nuclear attack that will be able to stop Tokyo from seizing the Kurils from Russia. This confrontation would be devastating. Rosa 22 finds that if even a small nuclear war were to break out, tens of millions of people would die after the initial blast. Nuclear winter would destroy crops all over the planet and plunge billions into famine. This leads to extinction. Star 15 writes that a nuclear war would be a mass extinction event that ends human history. Any nuclear war fought with even a fraction of the operational and deployed nuclear arsenals will leave Earth essentially uninhabitable, thus we negate.
I have a quick question. Could y'all send the case doc, but like with the rhetoric? Because it's just like the cut cards, and I can't see like what you interpret it as.
The case talk is not paraphrased, so are you just asking for the tags?
Yeah, you have a version with all the taglines.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Sent.
Sounds good. Alice, can you paste our doc in the?
Yeah, in the Westlake section, sure. Okay. Down here. All right, that should be it. Can you all see our case in there? Okay, cool. All right, then in that case, is everybody cool if I begin? All right. We affirm that Japan should revise Article 9 of their constitution to develop offensive capabilities, and our first argument pertains to the Senkaku Islands. Currently, China is aggressing in the East China Sea, as Chinsurya 21 reports that Beijing has dispatched a ship carrying cannon-like weapons near the Senkaku Islands, and the vessel has entered Japan's territorial waters. Thompson 22 explains that a Chinese attack on the Senkaku Islands is likely because of the weaknesses displayed by the United States, watching events in Ukraine, and considering American public opinion. For China, the Senkaku Islands are an easy target, as Thompson 22 furthers that Japan's pacifist constitution has prevented the acquisition of sufficiently powerful weapons to defend all of its territory. Affirming solves, as Kaplan 18 explains, that the only fact that prevents China from aggressing in the East China Sea is the fear that Japan could defeat it in an open conflict, something that would call into question the stability of the Communist Party. War over the East China Sea would be devastating and draw on the US, as Thompson 22 explains that Article 5 of the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between Japan and the US recognizes that either party would act to meet a common danger. Even absent direct engagement, conflict will inevitably spark. Peck 20 explains that even if the US supports Japan while trying to avoid combat with the Chinese forces, it's impossible for the US military to step in without American and Chinese troops firing on each other. This would escalate war to a nuclear level, as White 14 writes that it's hard to see how one side could win a decisive advantage between the US and China. That means further escalation might seem the only way to achieve acceptable outcomes, but at the top of this ladder of escalation looms intercontinental nuclear exchange. Our second argument is about ICBMs. Japan and Asia are at risk of new North Korean missile threats, and revising Article 9 is key. Jones 17, at present, the medium-range ballistic missile is the only North Korean missile Japan can intercept under domestic law. Article 9 means Japan can only intercept missiles that are due to land in its territory. Any other missile would constitute a use of force that doesn't explicitly involve Japan. By firing missiles over Japan, North Korea has calculated that Japan would sit idle and increase the chance of a successful North Korean test. Japan could not legally intercept the missiles, and North Korea gleaned useful data. Article 9's reinterpretation needs to be finalized to defend against the threat from North Korea. This is devastating as North Korea looks to strike Guam to prevent a preemptive US attack. NPR 17 finds that the US uses the island of Guam for war games and joint exercises, and Guam also stores a massive quantity of weapons. North Korea sees the military presence on Guam as provocation. Bombers deployed from Guam frequently come flying in the skies over Korea and explicitly carry out drills for war, calling Guam the United States outpost and starting base for invasion. Starensky 22 furthers that North Korea completed a test launch this Sunday with ballistic missiles that can reach Guam. The capability makes it possible for North Korea to fulfill its threat to strike the US territory. These North Korean strikes alone threaten extinction because Kim will be incentivized to fire multiple nukes at once. Ward 18 finds that North Korea wouldn't launch just one bomb, but multiple at DC and US military bases in Guam. An actual nuclear war would have devastating consequences. As Star 15 explains, that a nuclear winter would cause nuclear famine and a mass extinction event following the detonation of nuclear weapons. Overall, Article 9 revision stops North Korea. As Wardwick ND 22 finds, the repealing Article 9 will tame the rogue nation, allowing the state to invest in better missile defense systems that can intercept North Korean ICBMs no matter where they are, and will make the rogue state of North Korea have to reevaluate their strategies for launching missiles. Thus, we proudly affirm.
All right, are you ready for cross?
Yeah,
Fantastic. Can I take the first question?
sure.
Do you happen to know the text of Shinzo Abe's reinterpretation of Article 9?
So is this going to be like his 2014 reinterpretation, or what specifically are we talking about?
The most recent one, which shifted Japan's stance from a fully pacifist one to an anti-war stance.
So again, there have been multiple revisions. I know one in 2014 is cited a lot. So what are you talking about when you say the most recent revision? That's too vague for me to answer.
I believe it was 2015, but the effect of it was to shift Japan's stance from pacifist to anti-war, which allows them to defend their territory from attacks by foreign powers.
So that's the 2014 revision, which allows for them to participate in the collective defense of allies. But the key thing about that revision is that the ally that they can defend has to directly be near enough to Japan that it threatens Japan as well. So they can't defend any.
I think our wires are getting crossed. That's not the revision I'm talking about. I'm talking about the specific revision. I believe it was in 2015 that allowed Japan to defend its own territory against attacks from foreign powers. So inherently, this is my question at this point, why does that prevent Japan, under this new interpretation, from defending itself against ICBMs?
Wait, our argument isn't about Japan defending themselves from ICBMs. Our second argument is about Japan defending Guam from ICBMs. And the reason you know Japan is unable to defend Guam is that in 2022, North Korea did tests with ICBMs where they flew these missiles 500 miles over Japan outside of their territory, and Japan was unable to intercept them. That is the only empiric. And the
Oh,
fact
sorry. I guess I misunderstood, but Guam is a US territory,
yes, Guam is a US territory.
which means it falls under the United States' security umbrella, which has no Article 9 restrictions. But you can take a question. We've been on this for quite some time.
On your first argument about the economy, you read this evidence about how there's going to be more military spending and that's going to be bad. And then suddenly the next piece of evidence says if the entire Japanese economy collapses, that would be really bad. Why is Japan going to suddenly increase their military spending so much so and so short-sightedly that they'll crash their entire economy by spending billions on weapons?
So our argument is pretty simple. When you increase military spending by as little as 1%, you decrease economic growth by 9%. In a world post-COVID, where Japan's economy is also teetering on the edge, just like a lot of the world, a decrease in 9% of economic growth alone would be enough to drive millions into poverty. We'd say they're going to have to increase military spending by a lot more than 1% because of pressure from the United States. So inherently, you see a much larger crisis.
Wait, why is the United States going to pressure them to increase their military spending by some certain percentage?
It's the same way the United States pressures the rest of their allies.
Wait, who does the United States like pressure to spend more on their defense spending? Like, can you give me
I think that a better question is who the United States doesn't pressure to spend more on their defense spending. You look to the NATO group, for example. The US has been on a kick of driving NATO members to up their military spending for quite some time now, but that's gross.
All right. Is everybody ready? I'm going to address my opponent's arguments just in the order that they were presented.
Can you send the doc before, by the way, and I'll send one too.
Yes, I can, but the doc was not written for this round. It was written for a hypothetical other round. So like a lot of the jargon in the doc is not going to be how I read it, if you know what I mean.
Oh, can you send like the quotes afterwards then?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We're good then.
Okay. All right. Start on their first argument about the Senkaku Islands. First, their Chansoria evidence, which says that China is aggressing, is from February of last year, already 14 months ago. If invasion was already imminent 14 months ago, but it never happened, it seems that China has external motivations not to invade and won't invade in either world. That's a reason you do not believe their link. Secondly, their Thompson evidence doesn't actually say that invasion is likely. Instead, that it's more likely than invasion of Taiwan. We'd argue that neither are likely for several reasons we're about to say. Then, their evidence also indicates that the reason that China is going to be aggressive right now is because of the situation in Ukraine. But Lopez 22 last month gives two reasons that this is not correct. A, Russia's failure so far to overpower Ukraine and the West's rush to punish and isolate Russia for its invasions makes great powers skeptical of similar incursions. Because Russia's invasion has gone poorly, Chinese officials are likely to be more cautious. B, China has benefited from the relatively peaceful world order of recent decades. An invasion could disrupt that order and isolate China from the global economy. Prefer the analysis from our evidence because it actually takes into account what is happening in Ukraine and the fact that Russia is losing, whereas their evidence simply says that the war in Ukraine is happening without analyzing the outcomes. But even if you believe that they are correct and China is aggressive right now, that puts them in a sticky situation because if China is truly imminently about to invade the Senkaku Islands, Japan does not have time to build up their deterrent before the incoming invasion, and war is inevitable in either world. But then you can actually turn the argument to our side, as deterrence only encourages Chinese aggression. Brands 21 writes that numerous scholars have analyzed when and why Beijing uses force. Most reach a similar conclusion. China attacks not when it feels confident about the future, but when it worries its enemies are closing in. Since they read no actual evidence that China is on the brink of invasion right now, you believe that the only risk of provoking China into taking provocative action is by forcing them against the wall through Japanese militarization. Finally, there's a big disconnect between how they construe the beginning of their Thompson evidence and the end. So that's the evidence that says that the US getting involved would be really bad. But if you actually read their evidence, it unambiguously concludes that the US would not get involved because the Article 5 agreement between the US and Japan is extremely vague and Biden has no intention to get involved, which means we will never see a US-China war at the scale they need to access their impact. Let's go to the second argument about North Korea and ICBMs. First, let's just start by being very clear. Not a single piece of evidence in this round concludes that North Korea is going to strike Guam. Their NPR 17 evidence is power tagged into oblivion. That means they say it says one thing and it doesn't at all. It says that North Korea is unhappy with the situation in Guam and posturing, but not that strike is imminent. Second, the argument has no link. Japan Times 22 writes last month that Japan and the US agreed to boost deterrence and response capabilities in the face of North Korea's flurry of missile tests. The argument is already being solved. Third, another no link. North Korea will never actually aggress. Martin 19 writes that North Korea's strategy is to escalate tensions to convey its frustration, but keep its actions measured enough to ensure the US and South Korea don't abandon diplomacy. Mr. Kim is now opting for small-scale provocations to jostle the US back to the negotiating table without causing relations to topple. That's why they're doing things like missile tests, but would never actually nuke Guam. Finally, you can turn it. Militarization makes more war with North Korea more likely. Martin 10 of the Global Post writes that the US thumbing its nose at Kim by encouraging its neighbors to stand up to him would likely backfire. Increased tensions would bolster the regime internally while driving it closer to the embrace of China, triggering a massive arms race and tempting countries to step over the nuclear threshold. That's significant. It means that the biggest risk of the big war that causes extinction and provoking North Korea happens on their side of the flow when, again, you put their backs against the wall, which is why empirically, they've never taken aggressive action. Very easy for the negative.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, can y'all just put exactly what you read in your last speech in the doc? Thanks.
Like the cards?
Yeah, and like I guess any rhetoric that you have, but if you don't have it, then just the cards. Is
Yeah,
fine.
I have some of the rhetoric, but again, a lot of it is jargony, was not intended for this round.
All right, that's cool. Also, could you put it at the top, like above the case?
Yeah, I got you.
Thanks.
Just give me 1 second to finish up compiling the evidence. Okay, everything should be in.
Wait, where is that in the doc, by the way?
So at the very top of the doc is rhetoric on the C1, cards on the C1, rhetoric on the C2, cards on the C2.
Okay.
Okay.
And just to make sure, where's the third piece of evidence on? Wait, because on the C3 I got JT or Japan Times, and then I got
On this on the C3.
C2.
oh there, okay. Never
Yeah.
mind. Okay.
So it's Japan Times, Martin and Martin.
Um,
Nathan, you're cutting out.
I see,
Mhm.
is my audio like?
Yeah,
fine
you're
right
fine now. Are you just gonna run prep?
Yeah, I was asking my partner to call me so we can start prep time.
Yeah. Okay, I'll call you right now.
I will start prep time. U.S. troops. Okay, that was 1:25 used. So I'm gonna send the speech doc right now. I'll put that at just like the very. I guess I'll put it at the very bottom of the doc. I guess it's gonna make it easier.
Yeah, that sounds good. Is it gonna be
I think so. I might not.
Hey, Nathan, could you try turning your camera off just so your audio is a little better?
Yeah, that usually
Yeah.
helps. I'll turn it back on when I finish. Okay.
I just asked if it's gonna be quick. Like, will I need the speech doc to flow or no?
Oh, probably not. I mean, I'll just send it right now so I don't have to like send it afterwards. But yeah, all right. Let me copy this. Okay, I'll put it right at the bottom of the doc.
You said that you're putting it at the very bottom of the doc?
Yeah. All right, I just copied it. Let me go to the bottom. It shouldn't be too fast, and what's it called? There's like 2 cards. All right, I just put it at the very bottom of the doc. Let me know when that goes through. You see it?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right, yeah. So the order is going to be starting on our arguments and then like defending them, and then it'll go back over to their side, and I'll respond to my opponent's arguments. Okay. Is there anybody that isn't ready? Awesome. On our C1, they make a bunch of responses saying that China would never invade, and we agree with them. That means all of their terms don't really apply. But you can also cross-apply this to their argument about Russia, because I would say the same applies to them. If it's true that China doesn't want to invade because of the Russian invasion, and Ukraine, then obviously proves that Russia doesn't want to either, so the tensions are really low. But then, Onto this turn they say about how it's going to make China really mad. There's a couple problems. Number one, in 2014, we revised the Article 9 of the Constitution and nothing happened. But secondly, China knows that Japan's never going to invade them, so it's never going to have any massive implication of war or anything like that, because they're not going to be like, oh, argument in the round, and that is definitely the ICBM's argument because it's the most probable and important one. They make a couple of responses. The first just says, no, our evidence is bad, North Korea would never strike. But judges, ask yourselves this: what would you say is going to happen if they, number one, threaten to do it, and number two, are doing missile tests this very month right next to Guam? If they're literally making missiles to invade Guam and they're doing tests for it, it clearly shows they want to invade Guam. The uniqueness is incredible for us. Their second response is, no, deterrence is already really good right now, but once again, there's a few problems here. Number one, their evidence is very bad because all it just says is that they had a meeting. That is not going to somehow change all of deterrence. We need actual policy change, which only happens if you affirm. But secondly, they still can't intercept the missiles, so the link chain still goes through. The third response is similar to their second one. They just say, oh, it's like diplomacy is really good and we're somehow going to solve it already because North Korea never wants to escalate. There's a couple of problems here as well. Number one, this clearly isn't very true in the past because they've done escalatory measures and they clearly don't care about diplomacy. That's why they're literally doing missile tests right now. Judges, once again, ask yourself, this doesn't make any logical sense. If North Korea only wants diplomacy, why would they be launching missile tests and threaten to invade Guam right now? Secondly, because they fear for their security and they feel like they're going to be attacked in the status quo, that means that they're going to launch missiles right now, and the only way to stop it is by voting affirmative. Their final response in the case just says that it's going to lead to a bunch of backlash and an arms race. Once again, first of all, this didn't happen in 2014 when they revised the Article 9 of the Constitution, so why is it going to happen again? But secondly, I'd say because the invasion is already really likely right now, for example, they were literally threatening doing missile tests, it probably means that it's going to happen in both worlds. We have the only solvency. But let's go to my opponent's case. Their first argument is nonsensical for a couple of reasons. Number one, they say that military spending is going to increase rapidly, and while this might sound like a pretty good argument, there's a bunch of problems here. The most important one is the Wright 21 evidence, because Wright explains that among the choices that have complicated Japanese defense, one of the most consequential has been Japan's limit military spending. Secondly, again, it just doesn't make logical sense. Why would they want to destroy their entire economy to have a little bit of a better military? They would definitely limit how much they spend. Now, let's go to their second argument about protests. There's a couple of problems here as well. First of all, there's Zhao 15 evidence that says that when China gets too bad, it will lead to a massive war. It says that when China's economic performance gets too bad, it leads to a massive war. It has nothing to do with things like protests. But secondly, if their 2012 protests happen, why didn't it trigger their impact then? Now, let's go to their third argument about Kuril Islands, because there's a bunch of problems here as well. Number one, if Japan already recognizes the Kuril Islands are their own, they can believe that they can do things like defend it with self-defense measures, so they can have this war in either world because they can already attack. But secondly, the problem with their argument is that Russia isn't going to somehow like invade Japan because of, for example, Ukraine, and so Japan isn't really scared of this invasion. There aren't any tensions. But the most glaring problem is that it once again just doesn't make logical sense. Why would Japan want to go in and start a massive nuclear war with Russia? There is no warranting here. And finally, on this idea about miscalculation, I'd say that hotlines are solving. That's why it's never worked in the past. Let me cut down that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you take the stuff you didn't read out of the doc?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks. And then I'm good for costs.
Okay, that should be everything. Okay. Yeah, we're good. All right, you can have first question.
Okay. Let's talk about the idea that North Korea is testing missiles. So North Korea tested a missile last month near Guam. What was the result of the missile test?
It was successful. They found that they could indeed reach Guam.
So that's incorrect. The Smith 22 evidence indicates that the missile test actually failed. The missile fell apart in midair, which seems to indicate that North Korean missiles are not good enough to pose the threat that you're talking about. But you can take a question.
Nathan, we can't hear you. You're cutting out. Can you say that again?
Oh, is the audio fine now?
Fine.
Good.
Yeah, okay. I was saying, where is the evidence in speech? Because like that's a fine argument to make in Crossfire, but you haven't yet made that in your speech. It wasn't even in your rebuttal.
Oh, it's just in response to the idea that they're building up missile tests right now, because basically the responses to all of the arguments that we make on your case are just, oh, there's a ton of missile tests happening right now. We draw a distinction between missile tests and actual invasions. So on the idea that missile tests are aggressive, it's just a statement that the missile tests are failing. But can I take a question?
Yeah, sure.
Or actually, I just took one. You can take one. Sorry.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's talk about your third argument about the Kuril Islands, right?
Let's.
Actually, no, sorry. Let's go to your second argument about the collapse of China, right?
Wonderful flow.
If your evidence is just saying that when the China economic performance is not good enough to sustain the regime, it'll cause a collapse, how are you going to link that to protests?
So the Zhao evidence concludes basically that when the vast majority of the population is angrily protesting because they feel that China is like losing their territorial claims, that A, threatens like the regime itself because it threatens the stability of China. That's what Zhao says, word for word. But then secondly, the idea that the economy gets bad during protests is like pretty,
Wait,
intuitive, right?
wait,
Like if the people are protesting in the streets at massive levels, then that drives down economic
wait,
cooperation.
the problem is that you said when a majority of the people in China are protesting, it's going to lead to this. Your evidence is that there could be protests. There is no way that over half of the people in China are going to go out and protest
So-
about a decision about a Japan Article 9 revision. There is
Once again, what's important is that Zhao concludes that any sort of wide-scale protests, whether they're the majority of the population or not, could lead to the instability of the Chinese regime. That's what's conceded, and that's what's important. But I'll take a question. Let's talk about ICBMs.
Yeah.
So you say that like right now, North Korea is going to launch missiles. I guess my question is, what is the threat that is causing them to do this? Because the last time Guam was in the news was when in 2017, when North Korea had that whole fire and fury exchange with Trump. So what's the threat right now?
Yeah, so the threat right now is that there are literally missiles inside of Guam that are pointed at them. For example, the NPR-17 evidence says that North Korea sees the military presence on Guam as a provocation. They see that the fact that they have missiles pointed right at them, and so they feel like they need to attack. But that's cross.
That's been the same for years, but that's cross. Okay, Sophia, you want to take some prep? Just 1 second. Okay, we'll run a little bit of prep time.
All right, is everyone ready? Actually, wait, we'll take 1 more second. All right, it's going to be our arguments and then their arguments. Is everyone ready? Fantastic. the place you are voting for Whitman in this round is our first argument on economic growth. It's pretty simple. McCrum tells you that because of Article 9, Japan has been able to focus their attention away from their military and on economic growth. Inherently, when you repeal Article 9, that changes, and Japan must spend more on their military in order to keep it functional. Hiller tells you that when they spend an increased 1% of their GDP on their military, Japan's economy falls by 9%. This is horrible, and the reason why the Guam evidence concludes that repealing Article 9 would distract Japan from key socioeconomic reforms, and Oslin tells you that when Japan is no longer an economic model for the region and a power to be depended on, countries are forced to turn to authoritarian powers to keep themselves afloat. And Yaslin tells you that regardless, has the potential to push 1 billion people back into poverty. In their rebuttal, they read one response which got cut out, but it's on their document. All they say is, per the right evidence, that Japan has a limit on 1% of military spending. 3 responses here. First and foremost, the Hiller evidence is clear that if Japan were to increase their military spending by that 1%, then we see a 9% reduction in the economy and push people into poverty anyway. But then 2, what they miss is that the reason that Japan has this limitation is because of Article 9 in the first place. Inherently, when you repeal Article 9, you take away this clause of it as well, and they no longer have that limit. But then 3, the Hayes evidence tells you clearly that Japan defines most of their military activities as non-defense spending, which means that they would get around this limitation anyway. With that in mind, let's move to their arguments. Let me tell you why you're not voting for them here. First, at the top, 2 pieces of weighing and the reasons why our argument is a fundamental prerequisite to theirs. First, when Japan is in economic crisis, they do not have the money to defend against North Korea in the first place, and they're too busy countering other threats. And then second, we tell you per our impact that countries are turning to authoritarian powers like North Korea for support anyway, which increases North Korea's bargaining power and emboldens them to do more things like strikes. But anyway, look to their case proper. 2 reasons you're not voting for them here. First, the Martin evidence is very clear. North Korea wants to preserve relations with Japan and the US, and the only reason they're doing small provocations like missile tests is because they want to seem scary so that these countries will come to the negotiating table with them. If their end goal is negotiations, why would they ever do a provocation that would physically destroy another power, start a war, and destroy any possibility of negotiations ever? All they say in response is that this isn't true empirically. However, this is an assertion, and they do not account for the fact that North Korea's goal is to push powers to the table. But then second, per the Japan Times evidence, Japan and the US are currently in talks to boost defense in the status quo regardless. All they say is that Japan can't intercept missiles, and they're only having a meeting. On this, the US can intercept the missiles, and all that matters is that the trend in the status quo is going towards increasing defense. Anyway, on their nuclear impact, they read on our case that hotlines solve back for any nuclear conflict. Don't give them access to a ridiculous number. Easy neg ballot.
Okay. Did we take, how much do we have left, Nathan?
We have a minute 25, so we have a minute 35 left.
I'll call you.
Awesome. Okay. I'll let you know. Okay, we starting prep time now.
Okay, I think we have 7 seconds left, Nathan, right? That was 128.
Sounds good.
Okay. So the order of this speech is I'm going to be starting on my case, the AF, then doing some comparison, and then going down the neg. Okay. Before I begin, is everyone ready? All right. Start on our argument on ICBMs. Our Toshio 21 evidence finds that North Korea's newly developed and tested Hwasong missiles this year that precipitate an invasion of Guam that currently hosts missiles pointed towards and threatening the Kim regime. Unfortunately, under Article 9, Japan can only intercept missiles with incredibly close proximity to their countries, which has let the North fly missiles over Japan in tests and attack adversaries like test attacking Guam without any interception. This would be devastating, as Ward 18 finds that a direct attack on Guam would escalate to large-scale US-North Korean war, where Kim would launch multiple weapons that could potentially escalate to a nuclear conflict. They have two responses. The first is they say that Japan and the US are boosting defense. The problem is this just says that they're claiming that they're going to host talks about defense, but our AF-22 evidence finds that in the past, when the United States tried to put ICBM defense in Japan, Japan said no because it violated their Article 9 constitution. Even if they're having talks, they're not going to be putting ICBM defense in. Secondly, they say that North Korea is just posturing and like they just want negotiations. We'd say, you know, they're not posturing because they've developed tangible missile systems and they've literally threatened the United States and Japan by testing these missiles and flying them over Japan. If they cared about their credibility to do negotiations with Japan and the United States, then they wouldn't be jeopardizing their ability to negotiate by doing tests that violate tons of international treaties. Clearly, North Korea is in a try or die situation. The United States has sanctioned them for years, destroyed their economy. They're incredibly desperate at this point. They believe that an attack on Guam is the only way to prevent a preemptive strike from the United States. That's why they're doing tangible tests, not just posturing. On Wang, we'd say North Korea is in the most desperate situation, is the most likely of any country to launch a nuclear weapon. And on top of that, they have no experience launching weapons in the past, which significantly increases the chance of miscalculation. In addition, even if a nuclear war never happens, an attack on Guam would mean the United States would need to spend more on their military and decrease spending on things like social services. And the United States economy collapsing in a Guam invasion from North Korea has a bigger economic impact than their argument on Japan. On Wang, they say the Japanese crisis means that Japan doesn't have money to spend on defenses. Their whole argument is Japan is going to put all their spending towards defenses, so that makes no sense. And secondly, they say that countries are already turning to North Korea anyways. If a bunch of countries are turning towards authoritarian North Korea right now, this is just a reason Japan needs to build up ICBM defense in order to deter against the threat from North Korea. If North Korea is getting a bunch of new allies, clearly they care less about negotiating with the West, like the United States, so let's deter them. Let's go on to their case. Our Right 21 evidence is clear that Japan limits their spending on military to 1% of their GDP. They firstly say that 1% is enough to be bad, but the problem is they already spend the 1%, so they can't increase it anymore. If they increase offensive spending, it would just trade off with their defensive spending because Japan recognizes the need to maintain a balanced budget. The populace is never going to vote for Abe to massively increase military spending and harm their economic prospects, harm their social welfare. It's incredibly politically unpopular. And then they say they only limit it because of Article 9, but the resolution says to revise Article 9 so they can develop offense, not to revise the spending portion of Article 9. So this makes absolutely no sense. But finally, the idea that a protest in China over a decision by Japan will lead to a nuclear war is ridiculous because there are protests in China every other week and none of those ever lead to nuclear acquisition because the Chinese government always puts the protests down. How do the protesters get nukes? How do they even know how to use them? Like this link chain is like really ridiculous. Vote F.
Okay. Are you ready for Grant?
Yeah, sounds good. Y'all can have first question.
Sure. Okay, can you take it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. What international treaties does North Korea's test violate?
Probably a bunch of them. I can look it up right now, and I guarantee you I can find
Yeah.
it.
Okay, I can guarantee you, treaty or not, North Korea deciding to do tests and launch missiles
Okay,
directly at
that's not the
Guam
point
and
that I'm
territory
making, right?
is bad for their ability to negotiate with the United States, which is the only thing that's key to this argument that we're making.
Historically, it hasn't been because North Korea being perceived as a threat is an incentive for other powers to
Right.
negotiate with it. Why would the US and Japan negotiate with North Korea if they didn't think they had a reason to?
Yeah, North Korea and the United States have tried negotiating like dozens of times in the past. And where is North Korea? Our argument is that North Korea is nonetheless in a try or die situation. Their economy is destroying, their citizens are failing. They paint the United States as a massive enemy. They have museums in North Korea that talk about atrocities that the
Yes,
United States never even committed. Like the only chance for them to do well is to attack the United States.
I wouldn't say that's true. Let's think about why negotiations have failed between the US and North Korea in the past. The reason is that North Korea hasn't been escalating to the extent that they have, or rather posturing to they have in the status quo. So the US didn't see them as a threat. So they had no incentive to give them any concessions. That is why North Korea is trying a new strategy where they posture in this manner so that the US thinks they're a credible threat. But y'all can take a question. We've been on this for like a minute and a half.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like speculation. Okay, on your on your argument about the economy, can you explain to me? So are you okay. Yeah, actually, never mind. I have a different question. Why is Japan, or why would Shinzo Abe make the decision to increase military spending so much so that it cuts off things like welfare spending and like destroys their economy? Like, isn't that going to get him voted out of office?
So first and foremost, Abe is no longer in office. Your question is about Kishida. But more importantly than that, the idea is that Japan will either be pressured by the United States to increase their spending so that they are no longer dependent on the United States, or that Japan wants to right now, but is constrained by Article 9. That's consistent with the actions both of Abe and Kishida, who are looking constantly for ways to reinterpret Article 9, which is why spending will spike up dramatically. May I take a question?
Sure.
All right. Let's go back to talking about ICBMs. So at this point in the round, we all agree that hotlines are in place and those will prevent nuclear attacks. That is the defense that you read on my contention about the curls. And then Sophia applies that to your contention about North Korea. So if there are hotlines that prevent nuclear attacks, how is your impact?
Yeah,
nuclear?
so the hotlines are preventing a miscalculation. Our argument is saying they're going to launch an intentional attack, which is going to escalate to a nuclear.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Like really important. This is really important. The hotlines was a card. It was evidence specifically about Russia and the United States. You can't just suddenly say, "Oh, well, North Korea must have a hotline too," without any piece of evidence.
They do as well.
That invite though also needs to be
Russia having a hotline.
Okay.
It's about
guys,
miscalculation without intentional.
It needed to be in summary either way.
I mean,
All right, I'll take Rob.
Okay.
All right, starting now. Okay. Is everybody ready? Okay. I'm going to address our argument about military spending, then go to my opponent's case. Actually, wait, I'll take one more second. Sorry. Okay. The easiest place to vote in today's round is our argument about economic growth. It is extremely simple. Right now, because of Article 9, Yamaguchi 19 says that Japan has been enabled to predominantly focus on their economic growth, which is why McCrum 18 says that they've had the best growth in GDP and outperformed all other economies. However, the Hillard evidence tells you that even a 1% increase in military spending will decrease economic growth by 9%. That comes with Article 9. The Gunnar evidence concludes that Japanese remilitarization will distract it from further devising socioeconomic reforms necessary for what it needs to expand. That's really terrible. First, it causes other countries in the region to no longer trust Japan and turn to authoritarian powers in the place of Japan. But second, the Gaslin evidence says that will cause a rippling effect of recession throughout the entire Asian peninsula. They read a couple responses. Most of them are new arguments in the second summary. First, they say that 1% is enough to be bad. They never prove that Japan is actually spending 1% right now, just that is the cap that is imposed on spending. They make no argument about how much Japan is spending. Our arguments that it's going to increase are the only ones in the round. Then they say it'll trade off with offensive and defensive spending. Again, new, but there's no evidence on the question. And our argument is that it specifically trades off with economic growth that's Gunnar 14. Second, they say it's politically unpopular. Again, new, but second, it doesn't matter. They will feel threatened because they no longer have the US security guarantee and be forced to spend on defense spending. Then they say that they won't raise it above the spending portion that's set right now. First of all, 1% is still enough to trigger the recession per the 9% decrease that we read in case. Second, this is also new, but third, we say they need to spend it because they lose the assurances of the United States. At that point, our weighing is one. Our argument is that when this economic crisis ripples throughout the region, countries will turn to authoritarians like North Korea. They misunderstand our argument and think that we are saying that people are already turning to North Korea. No, our argument is that they will begin to turn to North Korea when the economic decline begins, which is really, really bad because that supercharges the link, gives North Korea more power. If you want to vote on North Korea, you're voting for the affirmative or negative. Very easy, Nick.
Okay. So we have 7 seconds of prep left. Alex, can you call me and then we'll start that prep time?
Yeah, sure. Okay.
All right. We will start our prep time. Okay, sounds good. So the order is going to be talking about our argument about the ICBMs in North Korea, and then I will be doing some comparison between both worlds, and then going down and responding to my opponent's arguments. Okay. Is anybody not ready? Sounds good. Judges, the round is over the second they don't have a single response to our argument in final focus. That means it's 100% probability, and it's definitely true. Jones explains in 2017 that we have massive tensions between North Korea and Japan, and that way.
Hey, Nathan, can you just stop real quick and maybe restart? You just cut out. I couldn't hear anything.
Oh,
Okay, you're good now. Yeah.
okay, I guess is my audio fine? I know I keep cutting out. I guess my internet's bad right now.
Now it's good again. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just restart then. I'll go back to 0. I was at 10 seconds. Okay. Judges, the round is over when they do not extend a single response to our argument in final focus, which means it's 100% conceded. And if you're struggling on who to vote for the side that literally has an untouched argument. Let's go to ICBMs. Jones 17 explains that Japan and North Korea have massive tension. That's why they're having massive missile tests pointed right at Guam. They're threatening to invade Guam. They're threatening to have massive missiles toward them, and they're literally doing tests and building missiles just for this. The reason why it makes a lot of sense too, because Stronghold 22 explains that we have massive missiles pointed at North Korea that are hosted in Guam, and for that reason, they're feeling incredibly uncomfortable and unsafe. They're feeling very threatened, and they have to launch now. That's really problematic because Ward 18 that a massive launch from North Korea could cause a massive nuclear war once again, leading to extinction because when they launch a bunch of weapons, it'll cause the sun to be blocked out, causing a bunch of deaths. However, you can solve this by voting affirmative because WANIC 19 explains that by repealing Article 9, you give Japan the ability to do things like shoot down missiles and overall stop North Korea from launching the missile, which overall saves essentially humanity because they can see that it leads to extinction. Judges, at this point, let's talk about the Wang. They have conceded our argument in final focus, which is that if you're struggling who to vote for, you definitely vote for us. But they have also conceded a really key piece of Wang that my partner gives in summary, which explains that because the US is so much more interconnected in the global economy and a bigger economy, if we have this war, that means that the US themselves will spend a lot more on the military, meaning that the argument that they talk about happens in the US as well. The only difference is that it's on a much larger scale and the impact is way bigger. So at the end of the day, we are winning that we stop extinction from stopping North Korea from launching a missile, but we also win that we overall decrease military spending. But with that being said, let's go to their argument, because once again, there's a few problems that aren't addressed exactly. The first is that their limit is 1% of GDP. We don't have Their 1 billion impact is about just like generally in the past, 1 billion people have been taken out of poverty. It's not about Article 9. And finally, they don't respond to the fact that why would Japan want to intentionally destroy their entire economy? So ask yourself this: what makes more sense? Japan intentionally destroying their economy, or North Korea launching a strike when they're under stress? Vote neg or vote F.
Shoot.
Great round.
Good round, y'all.
Yeah,
Are
good
are
round.
you cool with just moving on? Because I know he cut out on their side, or is that fine?
Oh, was I?
You cut out for 10 seconds as soon as you got onto their side.
Oh,
I don't know if the judges want you to say that again, or if they're fine.
I don't need it, but that's fine.
do the other two judges want me to like just like say what I said on their case?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you can, please.
Just the final thing where you were like, oh, Japan's not going to want to destroy their economy. That was clear, and then everything before that wasn't clear.
Did they hear the weighing about like the U.S. spending?
Yeah, the weighing about the U.S. is in there. Yeah.
We got
Okay.
we got that the limit was 1%, and then we got that the indict on the 1 billion impact. Nothing in between that.
Oh, okay. So essentially, I just said that it would just trade off. It was essentially what he said, which was that the defense is going to trade off with offense, and they said that we don't have a card for that. We just said we have the warranting because it makes sense, because if they need to reach the limit of 1, they can just use more offensive defense. And then I just said the right 1% GDP, the 1 billion about general, and that they wouldn't intentionally destroy their economy, and then that was essentially it.
Okay.
Good round, Joe.
Good round.
Yeah. Good round, y'all. Thank you for judging.
Okay, I was the last judge to submit. Congratulations to both teams for making it to the octafinals of the Gold Tournament of Champions. This is obviously a really prestigious round to be in. I really enjoyed watching this round. You both did very well. I've, had the privilege of judging you both before this year, and I thought that like this round was a great improvement over already really, really top-notch skills that I've gotten to judge. So hats off to you all. That said, the decision was a 2-1 for the negative from Westlake. I squirreled, or from Whitman, sorry. Sorry, the W's got me mixed up. And the 2-1 for the negative from Whitman. I squirreled and voted for Westlake. So I will go first. So I affirm. Up until Final Focus, I was planning on negating. I thought this was, again, a good round, that said. The neg, I think, has a bit of a rough Final Focus. Like the not extending defense to the AF case in final is pretty damning. And up until Final Focus, I think that your weighing like could have served as terminal defense to the AF case. The issue is that the implications aren't all there in Final Focus, right? So what I'm faced with is sort of doing a little work and extending those like implications that you link into this North Korea scenario too for you, or just voting on their 100% like probability solvency of nuclear war. Right. So, the AF also has this pseudo link in, I guess, about like solving for US defense spending, which they tell me is a larger variation of your impact. So in the end, like, I think that the neg certainly did like the better analysis in terms of the weighing throughout the round. But it just sort of comes down to the AF case being conceded. And I think both teams win their cases is the other thing. So I'm just forced to like to decide between the two, and nuclear war is for me the biggest impact. That said, like I really thought that the thing that I really liked that you, the neg, did was this analysis in both rebuttal and in summary about like North Korea's incentive calculus, right? And wanting as the best piece of defense on the NOCO case, right? Like that their incentive is such that they want to do these tests to try to entice Japan and the US to come to the table. I thought that was really smart. And Westlake, like, yeah, I wasn't a fan of your strategy of just trying to go for new responses to their argument and summary. I thought that was kind of like sus. And I also think like, there were better responses you could have made. Like the thing that you were probably going to have lost on was that other countries in the region would turn to North Korea, which is like the poorest country in Asia. So if like Japan, yeah, I mean, like, sure, they'll turn to authoritarian countries. That means China, right? China is the largest source of liquidity in the world. They're not going to turn to like the poorest country in the world for economic help because North Korea can't even get their own GDP to grow. So I thought like letting them get away with that was kind of silly. Especially because I was gonna like probably crack a joke about that if I ended up voting neg on that. But that said, again, really good round and good luck Whitman in quarters.
Okay, thank you. I'll go next. As I stated, I voted for neg. The reason being, as you stated as well, ICMBs. It's a fact that they keep trying. Every time, and then the US and the West go negotiate with the North Korea, and then they give him food and stuff like that, right? It's just a pattern. So they never struck anything, even though they tested number of times. And as the judge just noted, the neg would have served better if they have Final Focus is better. I agree with that article as well. The other thing was I also bought into the money of Japan. If they were to have peel off the Title IX, they have to spend more money on the defense, then the economy goes down south, then all the countries in the Asian Pacific will suffer. So, and congratulations to both of them. They did a great job. I appreciate it. And that's it.
All right, I'll go next. For some reason, my camera is not turning on, but I'll just go next. So congrats to both the teams. Both of you did very well. I liked both your arguments. Both did very well, I thought. I really like the neg arguments. I did vote for neg. I like the neg arguments. It was all very strong and very clear. So that's why I went for neg. I was actually, as Ellie was saying, up until the final focus, I was very clear that it was neg, and I was kind of debating a little bit with the final focus. The final focus could have definitely been better, I thought. In fact, the AF had very strong final focus, and congrats on that, both Nathan and Alex. I think you guys did really very well. It was a very marginal difference, to be very honest. So that's why I think, I went with neg. Overall, I thought it was a very good round, and both of you did very well. Congrats again for coming up until now, and all the best for the next round.
Thank you so
all so
much.
much.
Have a great day.
Good debate, Westlake. Bye.